Now to a fascinating story, because Hungary is taking a radical approach to stopping the fall in its population. It's going to make any woman who has 4 or more children exempt from paying income tax for life. Prime Minister Viktor Orban says the policy is designed to defend the country's future without being dependent on immigration. Well, our reporter in Budapest, Nick Thorpe, has been speaking to the minister who'll oversee this new policy.
In Hungary, just as in most of the European countries, I would say now in each and every European member state, the problem is our demographic challenge. That means that, for instance, in Hungary, our population has been decreasing now for over 3.5 decades. Since 1981, each and every year, we are losing some part of our population. So each and every year, we have more deaths than births. That's a big challenge for us, and for this reason, we have less and less people and women in the childbearing age. So that is why this challenge is not easy at all. But we actually decided to face this and decided to tackle this and to try to do something against, which is not easy because, you know, the government doesn't have all the means. To have a child, that is the most personal public decision, I would say, the most private public decision, because it has its public consequences, but of course it's your own business. I mean, it is up to the couple to decide either to have children, when to have them, or him or her, and how many children to have. What we saw in 2011, we had a birth rate of 1.23, which was the lowest. It was really, really very poor. And since 2011, it raised by 20% actually. So now it's 1.5, 1.49, which is way better, but still not enough. And I very much hope that all what we did in the area of family policy, and not only in family policy, but all the governance where we put in the middle the interests of the families and the sake of the families, well, it has its consequences. Now we spend twice as much for family support as we did in 2010. So we actually doubled these expenses. And for the state, these are expenses, but of course for the families, this increases their income. I very much hope that we can give back the Hungarian people the belief in the future, because I think that is the most they lost before. You know, to have a child, this is a decision for a lifetime.
Well, that was the minister responsible for implementing this new policy. Dr. Philip Blond writes about family and marriage policy. He's a former advisor to the former British Prime Minister David Cameron. He runs the Respublica think tank. Thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. I mean, there's a policy to tackle the demographics going on in Hungary. I mean, this is incredibly bold, or seems to be.
Well, thank goodness. I mean, because we have lived over the last 2 generations with micro policies to address inequality that simply haven't worked. It's why you have the riots in France, it's why you have Brexit, it's why arguably you even have Trump. So what we have now is an at-scale policy to address one of the great inequalities, which is under the Liberal consensus for the last 40 years, we essentially put a premium on autonomy. And if you look at most of the gender pay gap, about 90% of it is having children. So women pay an enormous penalty in terms of career, in terms of income, through having children. And actually having children in the regime which doesn't reward children makes people insecure. So I actually think this is an enormously progressive policy that stabilises families when they're at their most vulnerable. And I think it should be welcomed, really.
Do you think it is likely to work? Because that's the critical thing, given part of the problem here for Hungary, just like many of the countries neighbouring it, is the loss of part of its adult workforce abroad to other European countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of migration, you know, which one is in favour of for all sorts of reasons, also carries with it real penalties. And arguably Hungary has seen its most educated people, its most productive people move abroad. And they want to, understandably, stop this process. So they have to make it possible for people to be secure and have families. And I think that there's every likelihood of this succeeding. And I think because it's at scale, because it's bold, it's actually signalling the new types of policies that we need in the West to secure people, because the policies we've had under the liberal hegemony for the past, goodness knows, 40 years have made working class people insecure.
You say it should be broadened through other European countries. I mean, other European countries have tried to encourage, in terms of fertility rates and the number of children. You think of Italy, you think of France. It has been tried before. Is the difference here, is the worry here that this is twinned with an absolute outright hostility within Hungary to immigration, and they're part of the EU club that embraces immigration, but they want to do it a different way? Is there a fundamental tension here at play that may worry people?
I think the worry about migration is across the board. If you look at Brexit, for instance, in Britain, the number one concern above economic concern was migration. So people, working class people in Britain, and indeed in most other European countries, are concerned about migration.
But it's gone way beyond that in Hungary, hasn't it? It's basically Hungary for Hungarians. We've seen the absolutely bald statements around not wanting Muslims in the country, not wanting any sort of outsiders to come in. And is that part of what is at play here as well, with encouraging Hungarians to have more children?
Well, I think we need to decouple policies, because I think this is a policy that should be welcomed by progressives, full stop, regardless of one's take on migration.
But what I'm trying to get at is perhaps more than the obvious is maybe feeding into it.
Why would you?
Is that concerning?
But why would one want to impugn a policy that I think stands on its own? And I think making family life secure, which the Poles have also done, which is a tendency now in Central Europe, is something I think we should take, because it makes women secure and it makes families secure, and it's pro-poor. The debate around migration is separate, but Hungary on its own isn't on its own. Poland is very similar. The countries bordering Hungary are very similar. So I think it's wise to talk about a Central European concern that's different from a cosmopolitan European concern.
Final quick thought, because I mean, some of the tax breaks are enormous. I think it's around $30,000 to have a third child plus. I mean, can Hungary afford this?
It can afford it if it makes people more productive and stay and gets them to stay at home and stay in the country. Yes, I think actually over the long term it's about human capital investment. And some forms of investment aren't to do with roads and technology, they're to do with people. And this is to do with people.
Philip Blond, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.